All right, the dust has settled. We got through the draft. We got through free agency. Now we're in the true offseason. So I think this is the perfect time to look at the entire AFC and do a tier list. Where do these teams sit going into the 2024 season? Let's get into it. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry, that's a big win. I know he's towards the tail end of his career, but he's a guy that gets better as the season goes by, as teams get tireder and tireder and tireder. He just feels like a guy that's going to go for 150 and 2 touchdowns in a playoff game. So that's a big upgrade for Baltimore that's had just mediocre play since Ray Rice, really, in terms of offensive running back. Todd Monken did a great job with this offense last season. I think Lamar obviously showed that with his MVP season. Todd Monken, second year now with him. I think that's going to unlock a lot of things in this offense and really everybody's going to be more comfortable. So I'm excited about that. Nate Wiggins, corner in the first round. That's not a splashy pick by any means, but it's also, you know, that when the Ravens get a guy on defense, they're going to help and contribute right away, as well as getting TJ Tampa, one of the biggest sliders in the fourth, somebody that people had much higher. I heard first possible second round guy, getting him in the fourth. That's big. Baltimore got better. I know they had a few losses like Patrick Queen. That's a big loss, especially losing him to the Steelers, a division rival. But Baltimore is Baltimore. I love what they do. And I'm putting them in that A tier because you just know they're going to be competing at a high level, and maybe hopefully they can finally get over that hump and make it into that elite territory and get a Super Bowl, at least a Super Bowl appearance. Next on the list, another top tier team, Buffalo Bills. Buffalo's tough. They've had so many pieces leave. Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Stephon Diggs traded out. He's gone. But at the end of the day, they have some help. They get Curtis Samuel. They get Keon Coleman. And Diggs was on the tail end. He did not look good at the end of his time with Buffalo. You could tell him and Josh Allen had some issues. So maybe this is addition by subtraction at this point in his career based on where the relationship was. I also think Diggs is going to ball out in Houston, so there's a little bit of that as well. I wanted to put him in that S tier because of their history, but with all the losses, I'm putting them in the A tier. I'll put them right above Baltimore just because they've shown it. They proved it a little bit more than Baltimore has. But honestly, these two teams are very close, in my opinion, and they're going to be battling it out in that elite category of the AFC. Another elite team, the Bengals. I feel like this is very top heavy compared to the NFC video that I've done. AFC has some heavy hitters. Bengals are one of them. They did lose Joe Mixon. I think that's a bigger loss than people think. Zach Moss comes in, replaces him, but are you going to get Buffalo Zach Moss or Colts Zach Moss? You're hoping for the Colts version, but we saw that Buffalo version for a few years that did not look great. So we will wait and see on that. You got some offensive line help. You tagged T. Higgins, but you also lost Tyler Boyd. Joe Burrow's wrist injury on his throwing wrist. I'm getting worried about Joe Burrow. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. I love his swagger. I love his persona. The injuries are piling up with Burrow, and I'm getting concerned about everything going on there. Like, is he going to be back the same? I feel like we're continually talking about Burrow being injured, and when he's finally healthy, he's great. Is this a Carson Palmer situation all of a sudden where a guy's going to just lose his career from injuries and then have some resurgence down the line? Joe Burrow is much better than Carson Palmer ever was, but I am getting concerned. So I'm going to throw the Bengals. I'm going to throw them in the A tier. I'm going to put them right below these teams. The only reason why is because I'm concerned about Joe Burrow's health. I think the Mixon loss is actually bigger than people are saying. So I'm still putting them in the A tier. I love the Bengals. I think they're a great team. But Burrow, I need to see you healthy and surviving a season. Fully healthy like that Super Bowl year when you just tore it up. So wait and see with the Bengals. Next, we go to the Browns. The Browns are a tough team to rate. I got to admit, it all depends on the quarterback. You get Jerry Jeudy, so you get a little bit more help, but also Sean Payton gave up on Jerry Jeudy. So what are we talking about here? How much is he going to help? It's a talented roster, top to bottom. Deshaun Watson's the biggest X factor. Off-field stuff aside, he hasn't been a good quarterback since being on the Browns. Now he's coming off a shoulder surgery. What's worse than a healthy Watson? A Watson coming off a shoulder surgery. So don't have a first round pick this season because of the Watson trade. Finally, I believe next year they'll be out of that. But the Browns have a great defense, great running game, good receivers. Everything is ready to go. It all goes on Watson's shoulders. Based on that, I'm going to throw him in the B tier. I can't throw him in the A tier. I have considered C, but I'm going to throw him B. And it's just, can we see some level of hope out of Deshaun Watson, or is he just cooked? That's the Browns season right there. The Broncos. The Broncos are a weird team. Sean Payton came in last season. They weren't that much better than the year before. They were slightly. How good is Bo Nix? Are we in a place where he's going to turn into a Justin Herbert? They're comparing him to Drew Brees because of his short field accuracy. I don't know. They got rid of Jerry Jeudy. I think that's not a huge loss. They bring in Josh Reynolds, the least clutch wide receiver in the playoffs last season. For a bad team, they actually lost a good amount of talent. You lose Russell Wilson, fine. You bring in Bo Nix, you hope he's way better. But you lost Justin Simmons. You lost Jonah Harris. Those are big losses on the defensive side of the ball. The Broncos are a weird team. They're kind of like some of the NFC teams where how good is Bo Nix going to be? How good of a player is he? If he's great, then they'll be pretty good. But this division is tough. I think the Chargers are going to be way better this season. I think that the Chiefs are always the Chiefs. And then the Raiders are the Raiders. But you're in a tough spot. And if Broncos, I got to go. I'm going to give you guys a C. I don't know. Prove it to me. Prove it to me with this rookie. It's hard for me to really believe in a team that is talent poor. There aren't that many good players on the Broncos. There's some, but come on. I need to see it. When I talk about all these teams, I think that it's very important to note that things can change like this. Case in point, the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans were aggressive. They brought in Joe Mixon, Diggs, and then on defense, Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry. Those are big additions. They did lose Sheldon Rankins. But, I mean, overall, it's a net positive. This is a team that most people would have had towards the lower tiers last season before the season started. And then CJ Stroud came along and just lit the place on fire. DeMeco Ryans was a great head coach, obviously, and turned the defense around. This is an exciting team. Now we're in the second year for Stroud. I think expectations are super high. And sometimes with these types of teams, you see that drop off, really. I don't see it with the Texans in a relatively weak division, a very winnable division. I have Houston taking it. I love what Houston's been doing. And I'm going to throw Houston in terms of position. I'll put them above the Bengals, but right below Baltimore. All four of these A-tier teams are really in that same category. We're splitting hairs at this point. I think they have a lot more to prove, and they're more a rising star, whereas maybe the Bengals are kind of still a rising star, but with a lot of injury concerns. So love what the Houston Texans have done. Now we get to one of the biggest wildcard teams this offseason. I'm talking about the Colts. Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor are the keys here. You got two keys. How are they going to perform? How healthy is Richardson? How healthy is Jonathan Taylor? Are they going to be riding the momentum that they've shown in previous seasons, or the way that Anthony Richardson looked like he was going to take the NFL by storm? Or are they going to be injury riddled? The Colts are an exciting team because of those two big offensive pieces. They re-signed Michael Pittman Jr. I think that was a huge positive. In this division, I think the Colts are the team that could either win the division, and I wouldn't be shocked, or they could be in fourth place in the division, and I wouldn't be shocked. So this is the biggest wildcard team to me in the whole AFC, in my opinion. I'm going to put them in the B category because I do lean towards the positive side of their projection, and I'll put them above the Browns for now. I think that that's kind of a good spot for them towards the higher end of the Bs. But again, the B for biggest question mark because I have no idea what to expect from the Indianapolis Colts. Jacksonville Jaguars, talk about a Jekyll and Hyde situation with this team. Hot team to start last year. They were the hype train. They were the Texans of last year. They had all this hype. They started off hot, and then they folded like a beach chair. That was the biggest flop of any team. They lost 5 of their last 6 games and missed the playoffs. Now they lost Calvin Ridley. That's a big loss. They ended up replacing him with Brian Thomas Jr., which was a home run pick. So you lose one of your biggest weapons, but then you bring in a guy that nobody saw falling to that point in the draft. So that's a net positive. Where's Trevor Lawrence at this year? Is he going to take a step up, or is he going to kind of cement himself as a middle tier quarterback? Everybody's been talking about him like he's the future, and now we're seeing leveling out expectations of where he actually lies. At the end of the day, I think Jacksonville's biggest issue right now is their lack of a true number one receiver. They have a bunch of twos everywhere. Can Brian Thomas be that number one? We'll have to wait and see. For their sake, I hope so. Again, I like Jacksonville. I think they're a good team, but that faltering at the end of last season was a huge red flag in my opinion. I'll put them above the Colts. I still think that there's enough talent there, enough proven talent there to win me over. That's how I feel. All right, now we're getting to some easy ones. I'm talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's do it right now. Let's just throw it in there because it's pretty obvious. We're throwing Chiefs in the S tier. When you create a dynasty like the Chiefs have done, that's great. Now, Rashee Rice is ruining that. in terms of their wide receiver room. That can he stop doing whatever he's doing? I mean, he might be out of the league by the end of this offseason based on the way things are going. But they did get Xavier Worthy. I'm really high on that pick because of the history of Andy Reid with fast receivers, with Tyreek Hill, with Deshaun Jackson. He gets the most out of fast receivers, so I think he's going to hook Xavier Worthy up there. It doesn't matter how bad the regular season is, as long as they're ready to go in the playoffs. I think that the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and they can stumble through the whole regular season, and I would still bet on them every single playoff week. So S tier, Kansas City Chiefs. Enough said. Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. I explained them in one word: boring. In the draft, they didn't get a quarterback. They got Gardner Minshew, who's kind of fun, but at the end of the day, it's just the Raiders are going to Raider. Christian Wilkins, that's a big addition on the defense. They paid him a lot of money, so hopefully he pans out. But Gardner Minshew as your starter, it's just, this team feels like it's in walking mode. Maybe they're punting the season for next year. I am not excited about the Raiders at all. And I think if you're the Raiders, you need to trade Davante Adams because you're wasting his career. By the time you're good, he's going to be too old. So if you can get some future assets, some draft picks for Davante Adams, I think now is the time. And honestly, I would be shocked if they don't do that by the end of the trade deadline because it just makes sense. They need to get rid of him this season. You went all in a sense in your way, and it just did not work out. I can't see things get much better for the Raiders. I'm putting them in the low C's. D is harsh. No, you know what? I am going to go D. I'm changing my mind. I'm going D. I'm not excited about the Raiders at all. I like Antonio Pierce as the coach, and that's it. So Bowers was a good pick. I like him. Now you got two good tight ends. Maybe there's something there, but there's so many better teams in the AFC and in that division. You're a clear at least third, probably fourth. All right, speaking of that division, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. A lot of shifting this season. You lost Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, but the biggest addition is a healthy Herbert. He has been nicked up. I think it's been very obviously he's been hurt and injured for a while now. So getting him healthy, adding some offensive line help with Joe Alt in the draft, as well as Ladd McConkey as a nice receiver, hopefully will help. I think they're still kind of poised to add some more wide receiver help, maybe in the offseason through a trade perhaps. But the other thing is, how fast can Harbaugh change the culture? They're a team that always has the hype train going, can never live up to expectations. Now I think their hype is lower than it has been in a while with all these weapons leaving. Will the Chargers be a true problem this season? I honestly believe, based on Herbert and based on Harbaugh, that the Chargers are going to compete for that division because the Chiefs always seem to sleepwalk through the regular season. I think the Chargers are here to stay. I'm going to throw them in that B category. I'm putting them above the Jags. I see the Chargers taking a big step forward and really competing, even though on paper right now it might not look that way. All right, let's go to the Miami Dolphins. Mike McDaniels is one of the most fun coaches in the NFL. People love him. He's just a funny guy. And the Dolphins are a fun team. Adding Odell Beckham, I don't see that as much of a factor in my mind. Maybe a good third, fourth option that can bring some coverage, but at this point in his career is not much of a factor. Shaq Barrett from the Bucs, he's a great player if he's healthy. As a Bucs fan, I know he's a great player when he's healthy. Jordan Poyer, that's a good ad. You get Chop Robinson in the draft. I don't know if he's going to be good in the NFL, but I love the name. Honestly, Chop Robinson as a great pass rusher, I hope that works out. You did lose Christian Wilkins and Xavier Howard. So those are the two big pieces. There's some other guys on defense. That defense might take a step back. At the end of the day, most people think the Dolphins will have a good regular season, but are they going to be able to keep that speed when the elements get colder? They need to be good enough to try to get as many home games as possible during the playoffs. I think that's it. If they can have a really good regular season and take that momentum into the playoffs and not have to travel to Buffalo and not have to travel to Kansas City and get to keep that at home, they have a much better shot. So I'm going to put them in that A tier because I do like the Dolphins this season, but I have them just below the Texans. I don't know. I need to see more from them, more consistency, and better play against good teams. They played really well against mediocre and bad teams, but when they played a real competitor, they kind of got torn up a little bit. I mentioned the Raiders, boring, another boring team, in my opinion. New England Patriots, I do like the Drake May pick, so can that fix it? I hope so. That's the only reason why that gives me any sense of momentum in New England is the Drake May pick. It's also fun to see a team that's not coached by Belichick, so that's also good. I also like Antonio Gibson. I think he's rarely underrated. I think when he does play, he's a good player. He just needs to work on the fumbles, but when he's out there, he's explosive. I hope Polk pans out. They're trying to invest in this offense. I think they need to be a little bit more aggressive bringing in talent. You don't want to see another Mac Jones situation where the guy just has no talent around him. I'm not saying that Drake May is Mac Jones, but at least give your guys some opportunity to perform with people around him. Give him some weapons. Please, New England. Please. So I got to put you in the seats here because you're boring. I've said that before. I'll put them below the Broncos. They just rookie quarterback. I hope that's really what the season means. If he shows any sense of life, is explosive, and is as good as people think he can be, it doesn't matter if they go 0-17. If Drake May is putting up good numbers and is showing some good, he just looks like a good quarterback, then people are going to be positive about New England, even if they suck. So I'm rooting for that. The New York Jets. I like the Mike Williams ad. When he's healthy, he's good. Hassan Reddick, that's a good ad. Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, adding some depth on that offensive line. And then you double back down with the tackle from Penn State in the first round. You need to build as much offensive line depth as possible. The reason that you guys lost last year is the offensive line was terrible and Rodgers got hurt. Building that offensive line, making sure if somebody does get hurt, which happens pretty much every season, that you have the depth pieces there. I think they handled that really well while getting Mike Williams as that secondary option behind Garrett Wilson. The hype has died down a little bit. They were in Hard Knocks last year. They were riding high on this Aaron Rodgers news. He gets knocked out completely. Now people are a little bit more down on the Jets, but I'm not. I think they're going to turn it around. I'm excited for what they have. I'm going to go here. I'm going to put the Jets in that A category, and I'm going to put them right above the Dolphins. I think that's a good spot for them. I think they're going to win that division, possibly. Even though I have them below the Bills, I'm giving the Bills their respect. That's what it is. I'm giving the Bills their respect. But those Jets, if Aaron Rodgers is gunning it out, if he's healthy, if he's in a good spot and this offensive line can stay intact, at least decently, the Jets are going to be a problem. I would not bet against them this season. The Steelers. Talking about boring teams this offseason, I'm not a big Steelers guy. I get that you got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, but we know when you have two starting quarterbacks, you have no starting quarterbacks. I don't know what to expect from them. Deontay Johnson, I think that's a bigger loss than people are giving credit for. They added some help with the offensive line with their first two picks in the draft. They also added Patrick Queen from the Ravens, so taking a division rival captain and bringing him on your side, I think that's a cool move, and that works out well. I think they're just gearing up for their next quarterback, their next big name. They're going to do well because Mike Tomlin always does well, and they always seem to win 8 games, 9 games at least. But this is going to be a tough season for the Steelers. I got them at the B category, but the B for bottom of the B category. I want to give them respect because Tomlin's such a good coach, but I don't know, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, what are you hanging your hat on, especially in a very, very difficult division? Probably the most difficult division in the NFL. The Titans, it all depends on Will Levis. How good is he? They did add some weapons with Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd right next to DeAndre Hopkins, so they have 3 big receivers. But in my opinion, Hopkins is on the tail end of his career. He's not the same guy anymore. And then with Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd, are either one of them really a true number 1? It's like they're turning into the Jacksonville Jaguars with a bunch of number 2 guys at this point in their career. Losing Derrick Henry, they lost their identity with that. Tony Pollard's a good addition, but he showed with Dallas last season. He had every opportunity to be the guy. He could not do it by himself. So we'll see how he does in Tennessee. They did add J.C. Latham. That's a good add. I think adding that piece to really solidify that offensive line, especially with the young quarterback, is key. But in my eyes, I think they're the 4th best team in this division. Not by a lot because it's such a weird division. I'm going to put them in the C category. I'll put them at the top of the C category, though. I think there's still something to work with there. There is some excitement with Levis. Can he turn it around? Some nice weapons. But again, I think this is Houston's division to lose, with Jacksonville fighting it out with them as well. All right, that's my AFC tier list. If you want to see the NFC version of this list, check out my video right here, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.